The title of this video is pretty self-explanatory, so let's jump right into it. One of the most common mistakes I see with new climbers is an over-reliance on your upper body. Now, you'll often see this with people who come into climbing that already have a strong base in fitness or upper body strength. Now, of course, there are so many advantages to being strong, not only in rock climbing, but in life. I would never discourage someone to be fit coming into our sport, but there is a certain point of diminishing returns when it comes to being super strong coming into rock climbing. And that is that you basically strength your way through moves and you don't learn some of the basics of technique that most climbers learn when they come into rock climbing. I started climbing as a small 10-year-old that didn't have very much upper body strength at all. And so footwork was my best friend. And for that, it made me a much better climber over the years as I developed a strong base in technique, which helped propel me as my strength caught up. Now, if you find yourself as someone who already has the strong base of strength, it is important to go back to the basics and start focusing more on your feet. The most basic piece of advice I can give you is to make one foot move for every hand move. Now, the general rule here is to try to inch your way up the wall and not just make really big moves with your hands and kind of leave your feet behind. This advice is best used on a V0 or V1 or 2, where the hands and feet are all really close together in kind of a group. And so you are able to make one hand move for every foot move. But when it comes to higher grades, such as V3, 4, and 5, you're gonna see that the feet are a bit more spaced apart and the way you incorporate feet is a little bit different. The advice at this level is to reposition your feet in order to get a little bit higher before you move on to further moves. This is where you're going to have to employ a few other techniques such as flagging or foot switches, both of which you can find in our comprehensive guide to footwork on our channel. But for now, I'm just gonna leave you at use your feet, incorporate footwork, and don't leave them behind. You'll find that once you put more emphasis on your footwork and weight your feet a little bit more, not only is it gonna take some strain off your hands, but it's also gonna help you not get as pumped on the wall. Make sure you don't over grip when you're climbing, not get pumped out as you're trying to do a long cave climb. And with enough practice on your footwork and technique, you'll be able to work through harder, more technical boulders that aren't quite as reliant on strength in your upper body, which if you've been climbing for any period of time, you'll know that not all boulders are straight strength. A lot of them are slabs where it can even have no hands involved. It is well worth your time to invest in footwork early. You may be strong enough to do a V3 or 4 without your feet even, but I strongly encourage you to get those feet on the wall and learn the basics of footwork before you move on to higher grades in order to help propel you faster through the grades. Another mistake I see with new climbers is a lack of sequencing. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this term, sequencing is when you basically look at a boulder before you even get on it for the first time and just try to figure out where your hands are gonna go and where your feet are gonna go. Now, this can help you in so many different ways. Oftentimes, if someone doesn't sequence, you can really notice it on the wall. It's often shown in the classic looking around while on the wall, kind of pausing and just trying to figure out what you're gonna do next while you're holding holds. The best time to figure out what you're gonna do next is while you are not using up energy and you're standing, just staring at the wall. If you don't really take a second to look at your boulder, you might actually miss some feet or holds that could be very crucial to actually getting to the top of the boulder. I've done this many times, even in competitions. And it can be very frustrating when you knew you could have done it if you had just taken an extra second to look around at all the different holds. Sometimes little chips will be almost the same color as the wall and you can't really see them, or volumes will be part of every boulder and you're not sure it was supposed to be part of your boulder. Either way, you don't want to find these things out while you're on the wall because you're gonna get pumped just staring at the holds, trying to figure out what you're doing while you're on two little crimps or in a very precarious position. So take 10 to 30 seconds and just take a look at all the moves. Plan what order you want your hands to go in, where your hips and your feet should be. Get a good plan of attack for your boulder so you can get it done on your first try. The next common mistake I see often is on slab. and that is rushing your slab boulders. Most slabs are pretty slow, technical, footwork-based boulders. They require balance, patience, and often very precise footwork. The last thing you want to do when you're on slab is to rush through a move and lose balance while you're trying to do something. This can lead to very sloppy footwork that really is not gonna help you when you're on a slab. So if you're too fast on a slab, you're gonna have less time to stabilize your body and move through footwork sequences really smoothly. If you fall while you're rushing, you're also gonna have less time to really understand why you fell and what the move is supposed to be. So my advice is to be patient. Slow down your movements, even slower than you think they should be. Be really precise with your feet, and even as you're inching towards your next hold, keep inching. Don't rush it even at the end unless the move you think really calls for it. In the V2, 3, 4 range, you're typically going to see very slow movements instead of the fast coordination style slabs that we're seeing in the higher V6, 7, 8, and higher grades. The next mistake I see a lot is poor heel placement. Now, if this isn't the first footwork or beginner climbing video you've seen, you've probably heard about how to place your heel correctly. But even if it's said all over the place, it is still the most important and most crucial thing I see when it comes to beginner climbers. Heel hooks are just not put on properly. And it's honestly fair enough. Heel hooks are not a very common human move. When have you encountered something like a heel hook in a situation other than rock climbing? Nevertheless, it's an easy fix, and if you can learn heel hooks properly early on in your climbing, you will see so many benefits from it as you get into higher grades. If you're placing a heel hook, it probably means there needs to be a heel hook there. But if you place it improperly, it can actually make a move a little bit harder rather than easier. If your heel isn't on properly, you don't really trust it, and you're not putting much weight on it, it can actually put more weight on your hands and put your hips in a bad position on the wall. Especially on an overhanging climb, a poor heel hook is going to make it exponentially harder. Instead, when you're placing a heel hook, put it on one of the best places on the hold. Don't put it on the really vertical, slopey side of your hold. Try to put it in the nice juggy part. Once it's placed, you're gonna point your toe down, and at the same time, you're gonna pull your hips in towards the wall. That's gonna be the best way to load up your heel hook. From there, there's tons of opportunities to either go and rock on top of your hips. You can pull in towards the wall with your hands and your leg. It just makes your next move so much easier if you set the heel properly and use it to its full potential. The last common mistake I see with rock climbers that are new to the sport is T-Rex climbing, aka tense climbing. Basically, you attack every climbing hold with bent arms, which is very difficult, and it can get tiring after a while, even on easier kind of vertical boulders. Similar to relying on your upper body, tense climbing makes overhanging climbing a lot harder when you're trying to be really locked off on every move you make. It also makes slopers almost impossible to use. With slopers, you always want to be nice and relaxed and below the hold, and kind of put your weight directly underneath it. When you're trying to hold a sloper and pull it all the way up to your chest, it's gonna make the hold a lot worse to hold in your hand. Always being really tense in your arms also makes dynamic moves really difficult. When you need to jump or make a big move on a wall, you want to be able to really extend your arms and pull all the way through your entire range of motion. If you try to be dynamic from 90 degrees up, you're gonna have a lot less room to pull. So when you're climbing really any grade, you want to be relaxed. You don't want to overgrip, but you want to extend your arms and almost use your shoulders and the bones and joints in order to move on the wall. Especially when you're doing some of the lower grades, you almost want to twist into the wall and not really flex or pull your arms at all. Learning how to twist your hips in towards the wall is a fundamental skill in climbing, something that's going to benefit you all the way up throughout every grade you try. If you've made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. Please leave a like on the video if you really like it and think there's some good advice here. And stay tuned for more beginner, intermediate, and advanced technique from Richardson's Climbing.